Without further ado, I'd like to welcome you all to our presentation today on the cutting garden. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Nicole McGrew, who also does my job from time to time. She became a master gardener in 2021. She's also an attorney and a business owner in Alexandria. She's been a gardener since childhood, and when she's not working, you can find her in the garden or reading a book or planning her next trip. And we're delighted to welcome Nicole. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Colleen, for the great introduction. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the cutting garden. So here's just a brief outline of what we'll be going through, getting started, techniques and tools, first season, and then questions, summer and autumn, more questions, winter, additional resources, and then questions. So this is my friend Beth's garden. You'll see some more pictures of her garden throughout the presentation. And it's just showing how you have a nice little mixture here of different plants. We'll talk about more of these as we go through, and just thinking about the different spaces, the different areas that you might have for a cutting garden of your own. But first, let's talk about what is a cut flower garden. A cutting garden is a garden that's designed to produce flowers all year long. And it's also designed for actually cutting. I think a lot of us, we grow flowers, we grow our plants, we look at them and they're so beautiful. And, it almost like it pains us to cut them. But the whole point of these specific flowers and plants that we're growing is to be able to cut them, to be able to bring some of that beauty inside to the house, or to provide as gifts, to make bouquets, and just be able to share a little bit of the joy that we all get from flowers outside of the garden, to do it elsewhere. And as you can see that I have here on the bottom, and no, you do not need as much space as you see here. We'll be going through and looking at different ways and opportunities that you can create a cut flower garden. As you can see here, this garden on the left, this is a large garden. This is a woman I know named Jenny who has a zinnia cut flower garden. And at this garden, people actually pay to come and cut zinnias and bring them home. I know most of us do not have this much space, but you can, take the concept very far. Planning and getting started. There's a few key things that you should think about. First of all, think about what you like, because I don't think that we will care as much or care for a garden if it's filled with plants that are not to our particular taste, that we're not particularly enthusiastic about. Think about color, think about shapes, think about scents. I think catalogs are a really good way to just get an idea, either online or a physical one, to just think about, the different characteristics of plants. Of course, going to your local nursery is another fantastic way. They're right in front of you, so you can get a sense of height, space, scent, definitely, colors. And so just before you start digging holes, just think about what you actually like. And then think about space. Will you have containers? Will you have a raised bed? How much physical space do you have? How much light do you have? These are all considerations that you need to think about. You also need to think about your soil, especially if you're planting directly into the ground. If you're using containers or a raised bed, you obviously have more control. But just thinking about all these really practical things before diving in. And then also just being honest with yourself about time. How much time do you really want to commit to this? Do you want to be spending one day a week, like one weekend day a week, tending a garden? Do you just want to do a few hours a week? So it's really easy to get carried away. I myself have been guilty of that. And so just really thinking about how much time you want to commit to it as well. If it ends up feeling like a chore, you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to take care of it. And so, there's no shame in starting small. There's no shame in staying small. And so just really thinking about all these different things, space, light, time, sun, before you even step outside or before you even start digging. This is another side of my friend Beth's garden. And I liked this photo because it shows you the different ways that you could have a cut flower garden. For example, she has one container on her steps. She's not really using that container for cut flowers, but that's an option. On the foreground here, these are zinnias that haven't bloomed yet, and they're in the ground. And, she has this row that's getting ready to go. And then in the background below the tree, those are cosmos that she has going. And you see it's slightly raised, but just thinking about the different areas, the different spaces, the way you can make things work. You can have the container, you can have a small raised bed, you can have this strip here that's in ground. There's lots of different ways to do this. This is essentially the point. And there's lots of ways to do it in one garden, or there's lots of ways to do it in a garden where you just have one of these elements. And so just really thinking about different ways that this could work for you. And so now we have designing your garden. You've looked at your light, you've looked at the plants that you like, you've made some decisions, you've looked at whatever space you have or will be using. Everyone's situation is different. So I'm not going to say you should definitely use a 3x8 bed or a 4x10 bed, because you might not have space for that, or you might not even like that. Taking into consideration that everyone's situation is different, I still think there are some basic rules that we can all think about. So first one, leave space for picking. The point of this garden is for cutting. And so you want to make sure you have space to get in to cut the blooms that you'd like without crushing other plants. Leave space for circulation of the plants. Leave space for air, leave space for pollinators to get in. If you need wasps to get rid of some other insect that's in there. So leave space for those types of things. Follow the planting instructions. A lot of times we get excited and we think, oh, I don't want to start this indoors and wait 6 weeks or what have you, but they're there for a reason. And so follow the instructions that come with whatever you're getting. Know your frost dates. We've had really tricky weather the last few seasons, and so you might think you're totally safe, and then we get some random ice or snow like in April. And so I know this one can be a little bit harder as the seasons become less predictable, but it's still important to know them. Or if you hear that frost might be coming, if you've moved something outside, either cover it or bring it inside, because some plants really don't like frost, and if they get that one tinge, it can ruin it. And so just really be mindful of your frost dates, or if we're past it and it seems like there's some unexpected frost that's coming, make sure you do something to protect whatever you've already started. And then think of layers, tall plants and short plants, perennials and annuals. Think about how they will all look together, kind of like a tapestry. And then think about your bloom times. The goal here is to have flowers beyond May and June, when a lot of us have flowers. The goal here is to try to have flowers from, say, March, April, through to November, maybe even December. And I mean flowers outside. And then when we get to winter, we'll talk a little bit about forced bulbs for inside. So when I say layers, I mean physical layers, but also timing layers, and thinking about how do we move from season to season and have fresh flowers as we move through those seasons. Another thing to think about is your categories. Some plants, cut and come again, they not only can withstand, but actually thrive on being cut quite often, and they will just keep blooming and they'll bloom more. So, Coreopsis is in that category, cosmos, zinnias. They really actually like being cut and will reward you with more blooms. Then you have some that you can cut a few times. You'll get blooms that they'll grow back on stems, maybe not as tall, but you will get a second or maybe a third bloom, but they won't be like the Coreopsis and the cosmos where you'll just get more and more. And then you have your one-hit wonders that you cut them when they're in their peak bloom, and that's pretty much what you get for the season. Some of these, like peonies, you can only cut them once, but they're perennials and they spread. And so even though you can't cut them a lot, I feel like they're worth it because, in another way, they're very prolific because they're perennials and because they spread, and they're just really beautiful to look at. Just going over some basic design thoughts that are pretty applicable, whether you're doing a container or a raised bed or something else where you're finding space around your house. On the left here, this is me planting dahlias. This, I guess, must be from 2 years ago, and really just thinking about the spacing, thinking about what I want to do. This one, I was really thinking about the heights because, dahlias can really range. And so making sure I had the lower ones in front of the higher ones. And so, these are just the things you think about before you progress, because once they're in the ground, it's much harder to move anything. And so just really thinking about it before you get started. I've mentioned some of this already. Some of the things you'll need are seeds. Some plants, like sweet peas, like to be directly sown into the ground. Others can and should be started indoors. Again, this goes back to the planting instructions that will come with whatever you get. It'll specify whether it should be started indoors or not. Bulbs and corms, which are typically planted directly outside. In general, they're at 2 to 3/3 of their height. So if you have, a dahlia tuber that's, say, like this, then you would plant it, 2 to 3 times. So it's like that. And, with the eyes up. And with bulbs, you usually plant them about 6 months before their bloom time. So you're planting them 2 seasons ahead, more or less, for when it will bloom. And then for shrubs, just shrubs in general, but for our purposes, are usually fall, early spring. You really want them to get settled, develop their root system before they get the stress of the hot weather. So that's the thinking behind that. Like Colleen mentioned, I think this weekend's supposed to be beautiful. I totally have like my plan for what I'm doing in the garden, but this is like perfect weather for it right now. And then on the other side, we have our tools. And so you definitely need gloves. These are my gloves. You can see they're very well used. I got them for roses because, they're like a shorter gauntlet, but I actually use them for everything. And I love them. I just got them at Merrifield. My Hori, which is this guy. I like it because it has a serrated edge on this side, which is great for if you need to cut something sort of while you're out. It has a clean blade on this side. And I'm not sure if you can see it, but it has numbers. So it has inch measurements in the front. And so if you're planting bulbs, this one is really great because you can get right down. You can measure the depth because it has the numbers, put your bulb in, and then just, close it back up. The other thing I really love, these are my secateurs or my pruners. I like that they're bright because I'm always leaving them down somewhere and then I can find them really easily. My trowel, this one is new, which is why it's so clean, but I love the pointy end for it. I just find this one easier to use than like the scoopier ones. So this is another favorite. Tape measure, if you're measuring out spacing, if you're really following the planting instructions, and if it says something should be 12 inches apart, 18 inches apart, what have you. Your tape measure, string, always helpful if you're trying to keep track of where things are. And labels. It's funny because sometimes you're in the thick of it and you're super excited. And then you're like, oh, I'll remember what's here. I'll just jot it down. And then, especially with bulbs, a few months pass. And then you're like, wait a minute, what did I plant here again? Or generally what it is, but you don't know the specific variety. Sometimes I like to mix up the variety, even if it's the same type of plant, just to see what performs better, just to like mix it up, or if you're doing like the different heights or the staggered bloom times. And so it just helps if you label it while you're doing it so that you can remember. Now we're into spring, our first season. You've spent your fall planning, thinking about what you want, thinking about your space, etc. And so now let's think about what would be blooming in the spring. On the left here, I have a list of plants. The ones that are bolded are the natives. The ones that are not bolded are basically just ornamentals. I did a mix. Everyone's taste is different. Everyone's preference is different. You can have 90% of your garden be natives and then 10% be some of the ornamentals. I'm presenting some of my favorites and what I think do well here and what are really pretty. This photo here on the right, this is from Oak Spring Garden. That's right. And this was taken in April a couple years back. And so as you can see, she has the tulip, the lamb's ear on the bottom, I think a little bit of the muscari, some violets in the back. And so this April was still pretty cool, I remember. There's still just a nice mix of blooms here. So let's take a look at some of the other ones. We're starting with Fothergilla, which is a native shrub. This one I just love. One, it's fun to say. It's fun to look at. When I see these fluffy little white pom-poms, I think of like a Dr. Seuss book. It's just a lot of fun. And because it's a shrub, it's pretty easy. I will say, I have one in the front. They do take sun, but if you take sun, you just have to be mindful of the watering. Ours is in kind of a dappled section, but one season it got really, really hot early, and and it struggled for a bit. But I just love this shrub because you plant it once and you're done. You get these cute little blooms, and you can just take like one or two little snips, put them in a little bud vase, and they're great. And then just separately, I mean, this is not a all color class, but in the fall, Father Gillett turns into this really nice sort of autumny mix. And so the foliage I just leave on in the fall, but it's just really nice to have some additional interest. Just as much as we like to have blooms all year, it's nice to have just interest in your garden all year if you can. So this is Father Gillett. This you can find pretty easily at nurseries in the area. And it doesn't grow very big either. So if you're worried about space, it's not a huge shrub. Just something to think about is that in general, when you're buying plants, in addition to the planting instructions, you should make sure you pay attention to the height at full growth so you don't have surprises. And then we have foxglove beard tongue, another native. This one has several different names, as you can see on the side. This one's just really pretty. It has like a very airy kind of, delicate look. This one you can do a bunch and it just looks really nice in a vase, kind of ethereal. This is another perennial, which is nice. And just a really nice sort of later spring bloom, really pretty, really easy, just a really nice flower. And then we have foxglove, which is not native and it's toxic. So make sure that you don't ingest it. Depending on your household situation, you might want to skip this, or you might put it in a very specific spot where there's not a lot of access. But it's beautiful. I know quite a few people who grow it. It gives you the height. It's in this wide range of colors. It's not an annual, which my preference is for perennials. And so, once it's in, they have staying power. There's a reason why so many people like them, I think. And they're just a really gorgeous, really beautiful flower that you can grow, cut, and come in and just really have like a nice sense of spring, I feel. And then Hesperus. Hesperus is another dainty one with these really beautiful flowers. This one, be careful with planting because it can spread. And so this is one that I might put in a container or put in its own little spot, because it can self-seed and kind of spread. But it's just another really beautiful, really easy spring flower. It comes in white or violet. It can grow quite tall, but not all varieties. And so if you want like a taller, airy bloom, you can do this. If you want a smaller airy bloom, that's also another option if you just cut it a little earlier or just cut and then keep snipping. It's just another really nice, dainty, airy flower. And then tulips, of course. I mean, I think when we think spring, even though tulips aren't native to here, I think everyone sort of just thinks of tulips in the spring. They're just lovely. They last a long time. And there's so many different varieties. The one on the left here, I snapped this picture when I was out walking my dog, so I don't actually know this specific variety. It wasn't a friend's house or anything. I just saw it and thought it was great. But I have seen other varieties with the fringes, with the double bloom. And then look at the one on the right, which is called Fun at the Fair. That's that variety. And the striations, I always love the stripes. I just think they're gorgeous. I think during that whole tulip craze in the Netherlands in the 1700s, it was really the striped ones that really sort of set people bonkers, that they were really clamoring for. And then we later found out that it's caused by a virus, but it's beautiful. This is Fun at the Fair. I love the stripes. I'm not really a red flower person, but there's just something about this one that I think is fantastic. And then with the fringed one, it grows like that. And it's just so neat. It's like someone took pinking shears and just went to it. But again, there's so many types of tulips out there. And these are also a perennial. They will also spread in your garden if you have them for a while. But it's nice to have this little sort of pop of spring that comes back every year, easy to cut. If you don't want them to come back, if they're spreading too much, when you cut them, instead of cutting them, pick them way down. You can pull them up essentially from the tuber and you'll hear a pop and you'll get the whole stem plus like the white growth at the bottom. And if you do that, you won't have as much spread the following year. If you want them to spread or you're fine with it, then just cut them and then you can keep going. But just a little tip if you're trying to mitigate some of the spread of your tulips, if you think they're kind of taking over a little bit, but just a really gorgeous spring flower. And then flowering branches. The branches I like because, these are normally things that you have already existing that you don't have to plant. And they're just gorgeous. You see them, you see the cherry blossoms, you might see a crabapple blossom. They're another sign of spring. I don't like cutting when they're flowering like this, the tree branches. But what you do is, and it takes a little bit of planning, but in the fall, late fall, you're looking if you have like a cherry or something on your property, and you see one or two branches that you may want to prune right away. If it's not causing damage, if it doesn't look dangerous, and you think it can just stay on a little bit longer, then you can wait till spring. And then when those branches that you were going to prune anyway blossom, you can just cut those. And this is just something where I'm talking about like one or two, because a little goes a long way here. You can have one long branch with blossoms in a vase and have this kind of sculptural look. You can take one and cut it up smaller and have like tiny little vases like set up along a table or something. So this is one where you don't need to cut a lot. You're not doing armfuls. It's very precise, one or two, and they'll really go a long way. But I just think flowering branches are a nice other way to bring in a little bit of spring flowers that some of us might not think about. We are at question time.
Do you know of any cutting plants that are edible?
Pansies are edible and you can cut and grow those. More of the herbs I would think about too, like you can grow, this is later season, but I'm thinking about with lavender, you can take the pretty purple flower and do like tiny little vases. And then you can use the lavender for like a lavender iced tea, or even I've had some cakes, I think, with lavender or lavender margaritas. There's chamomile, a little pretty white flower. And then you can use the chamomile as well. There's a saffron crocus. You can grow the crocus. You can't eat the flower itself, but it actually has saffron like where the stamens are. And so you can use the saffron from that and grow the crocus. So those are a few I can think of off the top of my head. I'll think about it some more as we're going through, because I know there's lots of options out there.
There's been a little bit of talk back and forth in the chat about tulips and wondering if they regrow in our area, and other people saying they fade and other people saying they take over. Do you have comments on tulips?
All of what they said is true. Part of it is because there's so many different varieties of tulips. And so it's hard to generalize in some sense. I could definitely see some of them not coming back if they're a highly cultivated one. That wouldn't surprise me. But I definitely know others. I have a plot in my backyard that I did not plant. They were from the previous owners. And I actually have spent some time trying to remove some of them because the spread of them is so extensive. So that's why I mentioned if you grow some and it feels like they're kind of taking over, instead of cutting them per se, you're more like plucking them and you're really pulling it up. That's a way to keep some of them while also getting rid of some of them as well. There's so many different types and you really have to just watch what's going on to see the type that you have in your garden.
And Nicole, have you ever used a bulb cage?
Oh, I probably should. I have not. It's one of those things I look at them and I'm like, oh, that seems like a good idea. One season I planted like a whole bed of crocus and it really just didn't do what I expected. And then we sort of dug around to see what happened and they had been all eaten and chewed up and enjoyed in other ways by other creatures. So I've never used one, but I could understand the utility of one. So
Okay, we can get back to your talk.
and then just really quickly, this sweet potted plant here, I believe it's a type of viola. This is a picture from Oak Spring Garden out in Upperville, if any of you have been there. It's the old Mellon estate, and apparently Bunny Mellon loved violets and violas and pansies, and they're all over the property. And so this is an idea of where you just have it in a little container and you can snip and have little bud vases and then just have the blooms keep going again through the spring. Okay, well, let's move on to summer and autumn. Summer, this is kind of like our high season. You have lots of things going on. We have the heat, we have the sun, we have all of the insects out. And so there's a lot of things to choose from. There's way more than this, but I was just picking my favorites actually, because there's just so many to choose from. So we have peonies, cosmos, coreopsis, rudbeckia, delphinium, phlox, zinnia, and roses. Let's start with peonies, depending on where you are, maybe they can be a late spring to early summer plant. They're great because they're perennials. I have two, which also preceded me at my house, but they're great. This is them here. They just, prolific bloomers. They come again each year. I love it. They don't mind being moved. So you can divide them and then take them and move them elsewhere. This original set that was here when I moved to this house, I've divided them and moved them. So I still have the original two, but then I also have them growing in two other spots. So that's something really nice about peonies. I mean, you can just make an initial purchase and then just have it keep going from that. Some of them bloom earlier than others, some bloom later than others. So if you really love peonies and you want to try to extend your peony season, then you can get some that are early, mid, and late blooming. I have here some different varieties that you can try to kind of extend that season. One thing with peonies is just thinking about the right time to cut them. I know a lot of times we may want to cut them before they're fully blooming so that we can bring them in and kind of enjoy them for as long as possible. If you do that, just make sure that the head feels squishy like a marshmallow, because then you can cut it and you can bring it in and it will open up. If you cut it earlier when it's hard and kind of feels like a nut, that's too soon and it will not open. So just wait till it's squishy and then you can move it in and then you'll still get the nice, beautiful blousy opening peony inside. Just showing how a little bit can go a long way, because I'm not a flower arranger. I like to grow flowers, I like to cut flowers, and I put them into simple little vases that I find. And so like this here, this is two peonies and a bit of the baptisia that I had growing in the back, and just in this little tiny thing. And it was just so pretty, so simple, and it just made me smile. And so I don't want you to think that we're thinking armloads of flowers and baskets full of flowers. You don't need a lot. And if you don't have a lot of space or don't have a lot of time, a little can go a long way, just bringing that little freshness and happiness into your house. And then cosmos. Cosmos are great because, as I mentioned before, they're cut and come again. They're an annual, but the cost in terms of seed and time in the beginning, I think you get back in terms of how prolific they are and how much you can get for them and how much they keep chugging along. On the left here, this is my friend Beth's backyard again. And I showed a picture earlier where the cosmos were little. And then you see they've grown up a bit now. They can be very unruly. I don't know if you can see, but there's twine or string she has wrapped around it to kind of help corral them, keep them in line. And then on the right here, those are her zinnias popping up. So that's how they can look in a garden, depending on your space and what's going on. On the right here, this is from this diner in Tennessee that we were passing through, and they just had like this tub, like a silver tub, like a trough, and they had this beautiful arrangement growing inside. And so this is just to show that you can have them planted in ground and have like a bit more space and let them get really big like this. Or you can, have them in a container. I mean, this is a fairly large container, but it's nonetheless a container. I mean, it's about the size of like a baby's bath and then just taller, and have cosmos growing like this. One really neat thing about them is that when you bring them in, cut them when you have some in flower and you have some buds. And then when you bring them in, you can basically deadhead is what I'm saying. You can deadhead them inside and the buds will open up. And so it's one of the not so common ones that you can basically deadhead inside and still keep getting blooms. And so they last a long time indoors, and they're just a lot of fun. They're very happy, very fun kind of flowers, I think. And we have Rudbeckia and Coreopsis, which to me, I always plant them together. I know they're two separate plants, but I always think of them together. These guys, they love sun, they love heat. I have one spot outside my house. It's next to the driveway. Nothing grows here. It faces due south. It gets so much sun. And these are the only things that will do well here. And it's nice. They're cheery. They're perennials. They're just really happy summer flowers to me. The Rudbeckia on the left, this is another friend of mine's front yard, and they're just going gangbusters here, chugging along. On the right, this is a container that I had in front of my old storefront. Coreopsis is one of those ones where you just keep cutting and it'll keep growing. And so I would just snip little bits of it and bring it inside, and then it would just keep going. I mean, this would last me for the whole season. I have it planted with sweet potato vines because I like the hanging. It's a fairly easy plant. Pollinators love it. They love heat, they love sun, and they'll go for a long time, the entire season basically. And so they're just another good one to have in your back pocket. And then delphiniums, if you're thinking about the layers and thinking about how you want this cutting garden to look. So this is my friend Kelly's house again. So in the previous slide, you see the Rebecca here, and then you can see them here in the very front, and then the delphinium are behind it. And so she has this layered concept going with like the lower growing plant in the front, the really tall ones in the back. Delphinium are great because they come in a range of colors. Some people may not care for yellow, or they don't want just yellow. And it's pretty easy to find yellow plants, and it's pretty easy to find white plants. But sometimes if you just want blue or purple or mauve, it's just fun to be able to mix it up. These, because they're so tall, should be staked. There is a Magic Fountain series. They're shorter delphiniums if you don't want something that's this tall. It's just really nice to have that vertical element to your garden if you have the space for it, and really just sort of draw the eye across, but then also up. And then because this is a cutting garden talk, just thinking about cutting them and then having sort of this vertical element in your vase or whatever sort of vessel you're using as well. And then phlox. This is the Phlox paniculata, which is the type that I generally grow. Phlox I love, this is a native. They're just so easy. They're just great plants. They're another one that can just kind of take the heat and keep trucking. They come in a range of colors as well. I don't find them to spread quickly, but they can spread. And just really sweet, kind of, if you want something that's not a tall arrangement, but has like a nice kind of head to it, I think these are great. I have hydrangea growing, which they seem to never last when I cut them. And these guys, the phlox, I feel like you still get the kind of blousiness, like the kind of fun head, but they'll last longer. If you have a sunny spot, obviously this is what you would use, because you can't grow hydrangea in sun. But just a really nice, easy native to use. And then zinnias. And so this is back to Beth's house, and you can see her zinnias rising up. They grow a lot. They're another one of those cut and come again plants where just the more you keep snipping, the more they'll keep growing. These are annuals, and similar to the cosmos, what you put out in the outset in terms of doing your seed start and all of that, you get back in spades in the back end with all of the blooms. They're just great. They're happy. They're easy. They make people smile. They're so colorful. Look at this. I mean, it's just like little pom-poms in her backyard. And so just another real winner, lasts a long time. And then shrub roses. I did not like roses growing up. I found them very difficult, very just not interesting. And now I've done a complete 180, and I have this new obsession with them, quite honestly. I think maybe because the house that we moved to, there were lots of sort of existing flowers around here that I've had to get to know. And so, there were some roses here, and I think that kind of started my rose journey, so to speak. But shrub roses are nice because they will flower consistently from, depending on the variety, maybe late spring or early summer, to the first frost, depending on conditions and what you have. And so in some ways, they're one of the easier cut flowers to have, because you can just have this one plant and just keep going to it for flowers. This one here, this is called the Lady Banks rose. This is one that was here when I moved here a few years ago. The shrub for it is actually right outside the window. And so it's kind of neat because you can see where it came from. It came from right on the other side of that window pane. These don't last super long. I usually put like a little sugar in them to help extend them, but they're so prolific that in some ways it's okay, because I can just keep going back. This particular one, the Lady Banks, doesn't have a very long bloom period. I just go with it because it was already here. But some other ones, there's an Alwick rose, ALWICK, that will last a long time. And then I have one that is Silas Marner that will bloom a lot as well. You can get some that are fewer thorns, thornier. If you like roses, great. If you're a little bit skeptical of them, don't write them off just yet. It might be an easier way than you think to get some continuous flowers. One thing I will say though is that the sizes of them can vary greatly. So that's one where you really should make sure to read the grower's notes and see how large it will get ultimately, because some, they can be 5 by 6 or something. So just be mindful of that. And then here are just some more pictures of roses. These are actually knockout roses that I have in the back that I kind of needed to just plug in a hole. And oh my goodness, these are like the easiest things because I do nothing with these and they still just kind of produce. We're out of summer, we're moving into autumn. So right now, basically, beautiful time of year. And as you can see here, I have dahlias and asters listed. One reason why I only listed 2 is because a lot of the summer plants that we just talked about are still going strong. And so you don't really need to do as much because a lot of your summer plants, your Rudbeckia, your Coreopsis, your Cosmos could still be going very strong right now. And so you're just adding some other things to the mix. And also, I just think September just always seems to be a very busy time of year for people. And so let's try to keep things simple. And then finally, dahlias, there's so many different types of dahlias. So it's like, you can say dahlias and you can have pincushion, you can have dinner plate, you can have pom-pom. I mean, I don't even know how many varieties there are. And then asters, our native asters are just beautiful. I'm a sucker for a purple flower, if you haven't noticed, and I just love them. So let's move along here. On the left here, we see sort of like a dahlia wall because, they can grow very tall from a friend's house. And then on the right, these are some aster that haven't blossomed yet, but even the sort of the dark green foliage I really like. And so yes, so dahlias, like I mentioned, so many different types. The picture on the left here, this is from my friend Kelly's house. She grows a ton of different dahlias. And you just see this lineup, and this is from one garden, and you see how many different types she has growing. And it's not a huge space where she has them, just all lined up. And then you have some shorter ones on the upper right here. I had some growing just in a crock outside. This plant, it was like on clearance at Green Street. It looked so sad when I got it. And, you just give it a little love. And it was really nice because those were dahlias that I have other ones that like basically took over a space just for the season. They were so big. And so these were nice because they were manageable. I didn't need to stake them. Really easy to cut and access and bring inside. And then some other little pom-poms that I had that were really easy to bring inside. And so these dahlias grow from tubers. You have to plant them in, March time to get them for autumn. You can reuse them. I know a lot of people don't, but you can. And if you're going to do that, you should just make sure you label it. You can just put a little label around it before you put it in the soil. And then when you dig them out, you'll know what you have. And then you could just store them for winter and then replant them again in early spring. But just a really colorful, dynamic, just look at the different varieties here. One thing to note with them is that they will not open like other plants. So when you cut dahlias, make sure you cut them when they look the way you want them to look, because that's how they will stay until they fade away. This is my friend Kelly's house, where you saw that lineup in the previous slide. And you can see here just the range in height, the range in color. She has them interplanted with some Rudbeckia here. And just see the difference between the dinner plate on the left and like the pincushion on the right. It's the same species of plant. And they're just, just really neat. And so you can really do lots of different things with dahlias because there's just so many different types. And then asters, you might not have as much variety, but I just love them. They're such a staple. They last a long time. They're a native perennial. I love seeing the purple. It just makes me feel like, oh my goodness, it's fall. And it's just, the air is changing, the seasons are changing. And I don't know, I just think they're a great flower to have. Pollinators love them. They will spread a bit in your garden, not crazy. At least I haven't found that with mine, but they're fairly low maintenance. Just a really nice, sweet plant to have. And again, just like a close-up of the foliage before they open up. And then here we have some planted with Rudbeckia. You can see in the front here, this is pink muley grass that hasn't come into bloom yet. This will pop up in December. And so thinking about, again, with height, color, timing, that sort of thing. This is from my backyard. And this is like a slight slope. And so just thinking how you have the Rudbeckia blooming first and it's in the front, and then you move up and it's the aster, and then you move up more and it's the muley grass. And so you're moving physically because it's a slight slope, but then you're also moving temporally because you're kind of passing through the seasons as each thing comes into its own. The muley grass I don't cut, I just leave it. It's so beautiful, and I don't think I could cut it and bring it inside, but it's just, when it's in bloom, it's really something. And so just thinking with summer again, think about these layers here. The picture on the right, this is from Nancy Brooks. This is at her church. And you can see how we have some lower zinnias. We have these really tall, I mean, they look like sunflowers, but the heads aren't as big. So I'm actually not quite sure what she has here, but just thinking about the height, thinking about the color mix, just thinking about like the movement of the plants as you just look through the planting. And then if you cut some zinnias, because remember, the whole point of this is to cut them, to have your blooms coming, but to cut them and enjoy them. Yeah, I picked up this vase at some little shop down near the Blue Ridge. Like I said, I'm not an arranger. And so I just cut some, and not from here. These are from my friend Beth's garden, but just cut them and put them in this little vase that kind of arranged it for me. And it's just a handful. If you have beautiful fresh flowers, I don't feel like you really need to do that much because the flowers are doing the talking themselves. You don't necessarily need to arrange them. For summer and autumn, in some ways, the easiest season, it's hot, but you just have so many things growing, so many things that have a vigor and a vibrancy that can just take you through the seasons. And as long as you keep cutting, a lot of them will keep providing you with more blooms. And these are some more zinnias. This is from Jenny's Cut Flower Farm at Arcadia. Any questions?
Do you have any recommendations for cutting flowers if you have morning sun and afternoon shade?
Oh, like flower recommendations. Okay, so you said morning sun and afternoon shade.
Yeah.
Is it, you can do a lot unless this person hasn't had success with them, because I feel like morning sun with afternoon shade is a pretty doable combination. Like in our backyard, we get a lot of sun, and then after 1 o'clock, we don't get as much. The peonies do very well back there. The baptisia, I know I didn't talk about it extensively, but the baptisia does very well in that spot. Those knockout roses, those are all sort of in the same spot where they get a lot of morning sun and not a lot of afternoon sun. And those are all doing really well. I have an American beautyberry back there, which I don't really cut, and it's just really beautiful to look at. But I'm just thinking too what's back there. I even had some dahlias, the ones that were in the crock, like the shorter dahlias, and those seem to do well.
Can you talk about how you actually stake dahlias?
Oh, sure. So, and I feel like this is maybe true for most plants that need to be staked. It's always better to stake them early. And it depends on the space. So it might be 18 inches apart, it might be 2 feet apart. And it also just depends on if you're doing them like in a line or if they're like in a sort of a square. I would put one like in the middle, and then maybe 3 around, like assuming you have like a little circle or something, and then 3 around. And at first you don't have to do anything because they're not growing yet. And then as they grow, you just take string, you do it very lightly because the plants need to be able to move. You don't want it tight and rigid because then it might snap. So do it tight enough so that it doesn't fall off, but not so tight that it's rigid. And as they grow, you just add another layer of string, like, 12, 16 inches as they go up. So that way they're still sort of contained, but still have movement. They need the support for some of the more tender plants like the cosmos. It's because they're so wispy and you just don't want them to flop. With the dahlias, their stems are pretty strong, but you don't want the heads to flop. They just get really tall. They're really hard to cut if you don't stake them because you just can't really get in. And so start early before you see anything, and then just follow it as it grows, every foot or so with another loose band of string to keep them together.
This is a tough one. Do you know if there are any miniature roses or shrub roses that attract beneficial insects?
Well, okay, when you say miniature, do you mean the flower itself is miniature or the size of the shrub is miniature? Did they specify?
No, but it was when you were talking about shrub roses.
So we have a native rose, right? If your primary interest is that, then I would look for our native rose, Rosa rugosa. Is that right? Yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah.
and then for other roses, the little knockouts that I have in the back, they're not native, but pollinators do like them. I mean, there's always still bees back there, as well as other insects. We have bats that come at night, so I can tell that since the bats are coming that there's insects because they're happy. Other than our native one, I can't think of anything off the top of my head if that's your primary interest there. The other thing I can think of is if you plant something next to it. So if you have a rose, but then have another like a native right next to it that you know will attract a lot of them, and sort of do sort of a complementary planting where you still get your roses, but then you have something else. And what you could do, because a lot of roses don't flower to the ground, and if you don't want to have sort of the exposed kind of branches that you might, some roses, the way they grow, they're kind of leggy and the top is beautiful, but the bottoms are not so much. You can do like a low growing native around the base of the rose and then have your rose on top, and that way you kind of get to do both. So if you did like well, it depends on the color scheme, so I won't get into that, but but there's different options. You could do like a different color phlox, you could do green and gold, you could the native woodland aster, you could do something like that at the base and then have the rose on top.
Final question, do you have any other fall suggestions besides asters?
Native
Yeah,
specifically? Well, the woodland aster, well, it's a different type of aster, but there's a woodland aster. There is the geranium maculatum. There's like the native geranium is an option. I'm thinking of different colors, different heights. I mean, a lot of summer natives would still be going right about now. And then I think a lot of the shrubs really might be the way to go for fall. I'll think about it some more as we go through winter.
okay, a couple of people in the chat suggested goldenrod and
Coneflowers are more of a summer, but I see them going strong in the fall as well. Echinacea. And the echinacea, they have really nice pops, like really nice pops of color as well. And then they come in a lot of different colors. So now we're into winter. I'm not going to lie, winter is a tough time. So we have just a few different options here. Our native witch hazel, then we have hellebores, and then we have forced bulbs. On the left here, we have hellebores, and then the witch hazel, we have two witch hazel growing in my backyard. So that's where this one's from on the right. This is a different witch hazel from a park. This plant is in the same family as Fothergilla. They're both in the Hamamelis family, and you can kind of get the tip off because they both have these really fun, fringy kind of florets on them. This guy, it's so cheerful in the winter when there's not a lot of other things blooming. This one, I like to just, like with the other branches, just take one and put it in a vase. There's so few things growing at that time, so I like to leave as much as possible for the wildlife, and so much goes a long way. And so it's just a really fun shrub, small tree. I don't find that the leaves are too much to look at during the year, but it's still just really pretty to have, and it has a nice scent as well. Then we have hellebores, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. They have different names: Lenten rose, Christmas rose, depending on when it's blooming. And these are great because they're one of the few plants that you will just see when it's so cold outside. Instead of cutting hellebores, one thing you can do is basically dig up a few, pot them up, bring them inside. And your arrangement is basically treating it like an indoor plant, and it'll last a really long time, especially if it's in a room that's not super bright. And then when they start to fade, you can bring them back outside. And I'm pretty sure this picture is from Anne's backyard. If they start to spread and there's more than you want, that is also another way to just limit the spread. You can bring them inside, have your arrangement, and then once it fades, if you don't want to repot them because there's just so many, you can just compost them. It's a different way of cutting flowers and bringing them inside. But in winter, sometimes there's just not a lot of options. And so you have to do what you have to do. But it's nice to have something fresh, some fresh flowers blooming when it can be, long, cold nights, dark evenings, just a nice other thing to have. And then we have force bulbs. When people find out that you like to garden, I end up getting like lots of gifts around the holidays or for my birthday. And people give me a lot of force bulbs as gifts. I wasn't really like into them, but then I had them and I was like, okay, I guess I need to do something with them. But they're actually pretty neat. You get your bulbs, you would get them about this time because you have to do everything early, or at least get what you want early. And then you, when it's October or November, you put them in a cold, dark place. And then when you're ready to reveal them, you bring them inside where it's warm. Depending on the plant, I feel like paper whites are a little bit faster than maybe the hyacinths. You pot them up and then you have like a little garden inside. The nice thing about force bulbs is that most of them last a decent amount of time inside. And what you can do, it might be more work at the outset, but you basically prep them all at the same time. And then you can just basically, when one starts to fade, bring another one upstairs because you've done all the work at the beginning. So now you're just bringing them up and revealing them essentially, and just moving them out. And then you can kind of keep just doing that through the middle of winter without that much work. And it's nice because during the holidays, if you have people over or if you just want it to look a little festive or something, it's a way to have that festivity in your house, bring some of that freshness, bring some of that brightness in, and just sort of liven things up a bit. And this picture, let's see, we have the muscari and we have the irises here. The paper whites are like, the really delicate, pretty white flowers. And then the crocuses, you can do like little mini crocuses as well. Although I personally do not have a lot of luck with, I don't know what it is. But the other ones I seem to be able to manage. Some people seem nervous about them, I guess. But I think they're a fun thing to try, especially if you have kids. It could be something that you do together, like a nice little project. And then you can sort of track it and have fun with it. And then we have some final tips, or just tips in general, which apply to many of the flowers that we've talked about this morning. So in terms of cutting your flowers, the best time to cut them is in the morning, early morning. If you can't do it early morning, then do it in the evening. Basically, don't do it in the middle of the day. I've read different reasons about why it's better, but I just know whatever the reason is, the best time to do it is in the morning. And if you can't, then at night. When you're cutting, make sure you cut your stems on an angle. Sometimes you can even like cut them on an angle and then cut them like in the middle as well. And that's just to really improve the water intake. Just let as much water as possible, just really get into those stems and be soaked up so that your flowers are just primed and pumped as possible. When you're cutting, like if you're outside and you're cutting, and especially if you think you're going to be there for a while, just bring a little, like either a bucket or something with a little bit of water. It doesn't have to be filled to the top. It could be a few inches, just so you can put them in something right away while you're doing whatever else you need to do outside. That'll make a big difference. If you cut and then leave them and while you're doing other things, like the few minutes, the 20 minutes, whatever, it can make a big difference. So just put them in some water immediately while you're finishing up outside. Before you actually put them in a vase or a vessel, whatever you're going to put them in, make sure you strip all the leaves off that are going to be underwater. Those leaves will break down, the water gets all mucky and murky, and it will shorten the lifespan of your cut flowers. So just make sure all the foliage that will be underneath the water is gone. When you bring your flowers in, be sure to check for bugs. This has happened to me where I've inadvertently brought in a spider or two or some other thing. And so just really check before you cut, check after you cut, depending on what it is. If it's not super delicate, you can like just shake it a little bit. If you have like a hose or something close by, you can spray them gently to remove anything. Just be careful if you want to make sure you're not bringing anything in. With the arrangements, and I think I've kind of said this like throughout, they don't have to be very fancy. They can be, everyone's different, but don't feel like your arrangements have to be these very fancy things that you'll see in a floral shop or that you'll see like as a centerpiece in a hotel lobby or something like that. They can be very simple. These are a few dahlias that I grew. This is from last season. And it's just a very simple, plain vase, the big dinner plate, and then some smaller ones and a little pom-pom. Just very simple. It just felt like it was like a nice little touch of autumn that I brought inside. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't make things harder for yourself than they need to be. Just basically have fun with it. Plant what you like, cut what you like, and then arrange it how you like them. So, but we can do questions, and then I can mention resources if there are more questions.
Someone asked about keeping track of your dahlias and labeling them. If you leave them in the ground, what do? Do you put a stake with a tag, or do you have a plant map, or how do you keep track of them?
Because you have to take them out when the season's done. So there's two things you can do. You can either label the tuber before you plant it. That way, when you remove it, the label should still be on it, and you'll know what it is when you take it out. Like,
How do
no,
you actually label the tuber before
oh,
you?
I see. You can take like a piece of masking tape and you can write it on it. Or, those plastic ones that they're kind of like the zip ties, but they're fatter and the grippy thing is flexible. You can put one of those on it and label it that way.
Someone else asked if you track your garden by journaling, or do you keep a record of things?
Oh, I do. I have. So this is the notebook I use right here. I'm just going to go to a blank page because my writing's terrible. It's graph paper on one side and blank on the other. And it has little dates on the bottom here. And so this is on the side, like I'll draw things. And then this is the side that I'll write something. And so, yeah, I do keep a journal. I'm not going to say I'm religious about it. Let me see if I can show you like a not terrible page that maybe. So like here, I'll draw like what I want the beds to look like. And then I'm a fan of graph paper. And so then I write, like I have the date and I say what I planted, where I planted it, and like the specifics like that. I know some people have very detailed ones and they're like, on this day, this plant, we got a 1/4 inch rain and it grew 1/8 of an inch. I don't do that. It's more just like, this is when I planted it and this is where I planted it. So.
Okay, I think that does it for the questions.
Okay. Cool. Then I'll just show you some resources really quickly. This picture here, this is from St. Regent's Park in London from last September, I think I took it September 19th of last year, so almost a year ago from today. And I just thought it was really fun, this sort of topiary gardener. This is part of your handouts that you received already. And so just some really helpful books that I use. This is the first book, Cut Flower Garden from Florette Farms. A really helpful how-to, goes through seasons. She actually shows arrangements if you want more specifics on arrangements, and has some really good tips about flowers. Another good one that I have, these books, they're all hardcover, they're so heavy. This is the Land Gardener's Cut Flower book. Beautiful images and also really helpful tips about planting, cutting, preserving. So both of these are great because they're really like, these are the gardener's books. So if you're planting and growing your own plants, these are really nice how-tos. This one, Cultivated, I just love because even though she actually grows her own flowers, she spends more time on arrangements themselves. Like you can see the cover, that's one of her arrangements, and discovering your floral style and what your inspirations might be. So this is a good one to look at if you're trying to think about what you might want to plant. It's just gorgeous. She has lots of interesting history in it. So that's a great book. This one, Bringing Nature Home. Again, it's another arrangements book, but she goes by season and she'll list different plants by season. She doesn't have growing tips, but she'll just say, these are the plants that are in bloom this season, and this is how you can arrange them. So all 4 of these books I think are fantastic. If you're interested, I have some other listings here about where to get seeds, bulbs, and plants. Of course, you can always go to or you should too, not that you could, but you should also check out your local nursery. You can always find great things there. If they have a knowledgeable staff, you can ask questions about what grows well and that sort of thing. And it's always nice to see plants like in person, see how the leaves are, see how much sun it looks like it's able to take at the nursery. So different options there. With tools, I absolutely love Ace Hardware. I love going to yard sales. You should not overlook them for some older tools that are really well made that you might have a hard time finding or would be really expensive if you bought them new. Milwaukee is a Japanese company, although I think they're based in the UK now, but they have really great tools. That's where my secateurs are from them, and I love them. They're so fantastic. And then A.M. Leonard is another really good site that might have some harder to find tools. And then our MGNV page, you can look for lists of upcoming classes on our website. We have fact sheets. We have lots of other great resources on our site. You can go visit our offices at the Burlington Community Center. The address is right here. You can call us, you can email us. We're always here to help and share information. So yeah, I think that's it, Colleen.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for this very novel and provocative topic. You'll see it generated lots of chat, which was very useful, and we all learned a lot. And I think we all got prompted to start thinking a different way about cutting gardens. So this is a new wonderful topic, and we thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Colleen. Have a great weekend, everyone. And thanks for joining us.